All right. Welcome, everybody, to our Salt Health seminar on the D.A.S.H diet. D.A.S.H stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. And the D.A.S.H diet is something that not a heck of a lot of people are familiar with. So I wanted to bring it to your attention and share it with all of our members because it's consistently ranked as one of the better eating patterns available in terms of managing overall um, health throughout your life. So let's get into the specifics of what the D.A.S.H diet is and why it's so effective. Just a quick overview of the D.A.S.H diet. It's pretty simple. It's high in certain nutrients and low in others. And the focus for the D.A.S.H diet is on potassium, calcium, and magnesium. These are electrolytes that are in your bloodstream. They regulate blood pressure, and they're all part of that process. So low in sodium, saturated fat, and added sugars. That's where the health um, benefits are derived from the nutrients being low in sodium, low in saturated fat, and low in added sugars. So we're going to get into the specifics here. Just a quick thing. If you look at these pictures, the difference in freshness is pretty apparent too. The bananas, the nuts and seeds, fresh greens, everything in this little skillet here put together. The fresher the food is, the more nutrient content it's going to have intact. So it's important to try to eat seasonally wherever you live. I know that here in Northwest Arkansas, we have access to a couple of really great farmers markets. Bentonville and Fayetteville both have excellent local providers that have these things available. Maybe not bananas necessarily, but definitely seasonal vegetables that are appropriate to Northwest Arkansas. When you look at the foods down here, the D.A.S.H diet is low in these types of foods. These are highly refined products. So the product is highly processed. That breaks down the nutrients into a simpler form that is more easily absorbed by your digestive tract. And that's where we can run into a lot of health problems with managing blood sugar and triglycerides becoming elevated, maybe your cholesterol panels too high. That can be exacerbated by these types of foods down here. You see that nice big juicy burger. I mean, I honestly would probably eat this maybe once every month or so. I guarantee I've had something similar to that, maybe not quite that extreme, but I mean, there's a reason why we crave foods that are high in sugar, high in fat, and high in salt. It's a survival thing. These things used to be rare in our environment. Now they are very plentiful. And so we can easily overdo it on sodium saturated fat and added sugars. So that is a quick overview of what nutrients or which nutrients the D.A.S.H diet maintains its focus on. And Elizabeth, if you have a question, you can type it in the chat section here, and I can answer it whenever I have availability. All right, next slide here. So why D.A.S.H diet? D.A.S.H again stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. It's one of the top eating patterns I would recommend to patients in the cardiac unit at Washington Regional. D.A.S.H diet is low in sodium. It's been associated with lower blood pressure, lower adverse cardiac event risk from coronary artery disease, decreased rates of hypertension. It's associated with lower rates of congestive heart failure, decreases your stroke risk, decreases type 2 diabetes risk, and obesity rates overall for individuals that adhere to this type of eating pattern. D.A.S.H is also very convenient. It doesn't restrict major food groups. So it's not restrictive. We're not cutting out vast categories of foods, unnecessarily. It's easy to find Dash Diet recipes and resources. The Dash Diet has been around for long enough that all you have to do is do a quick search and you'll find all kinds of resources. I'm going to open a couple here just to give you an idea of what those resources look like. So I'm going to switch over and share this screen as soon as it pops up here. This is a website from the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, and they have an entire website or a series of sites dedicated to the DASH diet eating pattern. There are all kinds of tools and resources that you can find here, videos on helpful cooking, on how to implement recipes that fall within the DASH eating pattern. And that is just one example of a good place to find resources. They also have a lot of ethnic or culturally centered recipes that are helpful here too. So not everyone has the standard American eating pattern where you have a protein, a carb, and a vegetable with dinner. A lot of different cultures have a much more diverse palate, and their dinners, their meals are going to look different. So this is a good resource if you're working in that community or you're part of any of those communities. You can find recipes within that type of style to fit your needs here on the DASH eating pattern. So go back over to the presentation. Now we're going to go to some DASH recipes from the Mayo Clinic. So healthy DASH diet recipes, you can see right off the bat, they have lots of things available to us here. If anyone sees anything that looks interesting, let's go ahead and open up one of these recipes and see what it entails. What does it look like? How complicated is it? Does anyone, feel free to shout it out too or type it in the chat. Let me know if you want me to click on any of these and figure out what they look like. How complicated are they? Anybody want to offer a shout out or something you want me to check out here? Coconut shrimp. Okay. I think the last time I had coconut shrimp was Red Lobster somewhere. So it would be nice to make it at home. You don't have to use the giant shrimp. You can use smaller shrimp, just plain for less breading and less baking time. That's a very good, helpful tip there. So number of servings, this recipe serves 6 servings, and they give you the ingredients. They give you the directions, just like any standard recipe. They also give you the nutrient analysis breakdown, which I find really helpful. The total sodium for one serving, 2 shrimp, and those are the big ones, 396 milligrams per serving. So that is better than a meal. For example, you might get at a fast food restaurant that has 8 to 1200 or more milligrams of sodium per meal. And we'll cover what is considered high sodium, what is considered an acceptable or reasonable amount. So looking at this recipe, looks pretty simple. Heat your oven up, coat a baking sheet with cooking spray, place the coconut and panko, salt, and food processor and process until the mixture is even consistency. Place the mixture in a bowl, place the coconut milk in another small bowl, dip it in there, and then it looks like you just bake until they're done. 10 to 15 minutes. Honestly, this would not take a heck of a long time to make, and it would be a good diversion from what you might normally have for dinner. So mixing it up again is keeping the variety fresh is important. So that's a good one. Let's go back and see if there's any other recipes that look interesting here. I'm going to click on not just an appetizer, but maybe a full meal. Let me try to find one here. We've got all kinds of things on it. main dish recipes. So let's go with bean salad with balsamic vinaigrette. Again, serve 6 people. And there's your ingredients and directions. Very low in sodium. Again, the primary nutrient that we're avoiding with the D.A.S.H diet is going to be sodium. So that's just a couple of examples of resources you can find on the D.A.S.H diet if you're looking for recipes to follow. Go back to sharing my presentation here. Okay. The other aspect that I like about the D.A.S.H diet is that it's not a low carb diet. So there is really no major restrictions on carbohydrate intake. One group of people that might want to find or follow a lower carb version of this plan would be people that are already diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, or if you are trending towards having higher blood sugar levels. You would probably want to lower the amount of grains that this diet plan recommends, maybe switch more to the non-starchy vegetables. So this is blood pressure categories from the American Heart Association. Diagnostic criteria for stage 1 hypertension, stage 2, and then what would be considered a hypertensive crisis. Sodium exacerbates or causes blood pressure to rise in many people. There are some people that they're not as sensitive to sodium. It's related to underlying genetics that influence how susceptible you are to sodium. But generally, sodium increases blood pressure in most people to some extent. So normal blood pressure is anything less than 120 for systolic, and then diastolic is less than 80. My blood pressure ranges anywhere from 120 to 90 there. So, I mean, it is technically in this elevated range a good part of the time. Now, I normally have it measured at the dentist, and I don't love being at the dentist. So I would imagine my blood pressure tends to rise slightly when I'm in that dentist chair. It's higher after I drink caffeine. Caffeine can constrict or tighten your blood vessels and increase blood pressure as well. So you don't want to measure blood pressure after you've drank a cup of coffee, for example. It can be falsely high. I mean, technically it is still high, but at a baseline, it's a good idea to know what your baseline blood pressure is. And I'll talk about how to measure it at home so you can test that. Does anyone care to share what your blood pressure tends to be? Keep in mind, we're recording and everyone would be able to hear and see it. If you don't feel comfortable sharing that, you don't have to, but anyone that wants to chime in or give me a clue as to where your blood pressure range is, it might be helpful to share that. No takers? Okay.
Mine,
Oh, yes.
mine. When I last tested a couple of weeks back at the doctor's office was 100 by 64.
Very good. That might even be a little bit low. There's also something called hypotension, and that. So, did they talk to you about that when you were there?
No, he didn't say anything.
It's not low
And
enough.
the previous one in November was 120 by 80. So that was in November, and this was in January, just a few weeks back.
Interesting. Now, when you measured it and it was 120 over 80, how were you sitting down or were you
Yeah,
standing?
I was sitting down. It was in the doctor's office.
Hmm. And so, technically you want it to be less than 120 and less than 80, but we're splitting hairs here. I would consider that pretty normal. So it sounds like you trend towards having a normal, healthy blood pressure most of the time.
Hmm.
So that's an example of a really good starting point.
Hmm.
Um, if you ever noticed your blood pressure increasing as you age, you might look at a couple of different things. Sodium would be one of those things to evaluate in your diet. You might also think about things that harden or increase the hardness or decreases flexibility of your arteries, including things like calcification. Sometimes calcium intake can cause the arteries to harden if the calcium starts to be deposited in the blood vessel wall. So one way to mitigate that risk is if you take vitamin D, for example, you want to be sure to be on vitamin K2 as well to help prevent that calcification from happening. And that's another one that's impacted by genetic risk as well. So just some things to think about, but it sounds like you generally have pretty healthy blood pressure. Mine, I know it runs in my family. My grandfather at one point went into get his teeth worked on, and he was in a hypertensive crisis, and they admitted him to the ER right then and there to get it under control. So it can be really dangerous if you're unaware of it. There's not always symptoms associated with high blood pressure, so be aware of that. You do need to check it regularly. How can you check it at home? There are a few tips that the American Heart Association has provided. So, first is choosing a monitor. You want to select a monitor that goes around your upper arm. So, like, think about your bicep area. Wrist and finger monitors are not as accurate when measuring blood pressure. It's ideal to have an automated monitor which has a cuff that inflates itself. So when you come into the doctor's office and the nurse is measuring you, she's looking at that little dial and she knows how much pressure to apply and when to stop that adding of pressure. With an automated dial, you don't have to know what those dials mean. You can just set it, hit it to run, and it'll do it all on its own. Look for a monitor that has a digital readout that is large and bright enough to see clearly so that you don't misinterpret the results. And then consider a monitor that also plugs into your smartphone or connects to your smartphone to transfer the readings to an app. Then you can actually graph over time what your blood pressure is trending. Some devices can send readings wirelessly to your phone. It's very common now to have those. So that's for choosing a monitor. Now, for using the monitor at home, you want to follow these guidelines. Again, avoid caffeinated or alcoholic beverages 30 minutes beforehand. I would recommend avoiding for a full hour ahead of time. That gives it time to kind of clear your bloodstream a little bit more. You'll be less likely to have that be an impact and being falsely reading as high. Sit quietly for about 5 minutes with your back supported and your legs uncrossed. Crossing your legs can increase blood pressure. Um, and you want to support your arm so that your elbow is at or near your heart level. So just imagine sitting in a chair, kind of like I am here, just resting easily for about 5 minutes, and you allow your body to calm and be at a baseline state so you can start the reading. Wrap the cuff over bare skin. Don't go over clothing. It's not going to be as accurate. Don't talk during the measurement. Talking can change blood pressure slightly. Even thoughts and feelings can sometimes influence your blood pressure. You know, anxiety or worry or anger or fear. Those types of emotions can affect blood pressure. Not leave, the deflated cuff in place. Wait for a minute and then take a second reading. So after it measures that first reading, you want to give it a second and then take another reading. If the readings are close, you want to average them. If not, you want to repeat again and average the 3 readings. So If they're kind of all over the place, take up to 3 readings and average those 3 together. Keep a record of your blood pressure readings, including the time of day. And again, if you have that smartphone connection to your blood pressure monitor, you won't have to record it on paper. You can just track it on an app. So it takes away the work for you. So how does sodium cause blood pressure to be high? Your sodium concentration in your bloodstream, it's important to get enough sodium so that you maintain adequate blood pressure. It's a necessary nutrient. You're definitely going to get enough sodium in your diet if you follow, if you're eating food in the United States, you're going to get enough sodium. The risk is when it's too high is that it actually causes water to be brought into your blood vessel to try to dilute the concentration of sodium. And that draws more fluid into your blood vessel that causes swelling of your blood vessels. And that's where the pressure increase comes from. It's like if your home had really high water pressure and you turn on the pipe or turn on the faucet and it just shoots out and sprays everywhere. A similar thing is happening in your blood vessels when you have high blood pressure caused by sodium being too high. Too much fluid in a constrained space is going to cause micro tears in your blood vessel. It can cause damage to the blood vessel lining. When you have damage to the blood vessel lining, cholesterol is used as a repair, kind of like a putty or patch to repair those micro tears that are caused by high blood pressure. So if you have high blood pressure and you have high cholesterol levels, it's kind of like a double, even more damaging or dangerous when you have those two in combination with one another. Even people that have normal cholesterol levels, if they still have high blood pressure that causes micro tears and damage, even the normal cholesterol levels, that cholesterol is going to be used to repair and pack on over time. That can lead to plaque buildup. The plaque hardens, eventually causing occlusion of the blood vessels. And we're all familiar with like coronary artery disease, for example. That's where the plaque buildup has become so great that it blocks off blood flow to the heart, and that causes heart attack. So that's a direct connection between sodium and long-term risk of heart attacks, myocardial infarctions. So this is a quick little study that measured sodium excretion, like how much sodium was being excreted in urine every day, kind of a guideline of how much sodium a person has had. And then their blood pressure was taken as well to kind of see if there was a correlation. And sure enough, the higher the sodium excretion or intake, the higher the, looks like it was the systolic blood pressure was in that individual. So just the graphical representation to show you how sodium truly does affect blood pressure. How much sodium would be considered too high? The typical American diet averages over 3,400 milligrams of sodium every day. That's 3.5 grams of sodium, about 3.5 grams. If you have a gram scale at home, you can actually take table salt and measure out, what does 3.5 grams look like. Might be a little different because sodium chloride, only half of the molecule is sodium, so you have to double that volume. Anyway, long story short, we get way too much sodium in our diet daily. The D.A.S.H diet limits sodium to 2,300 milligrams per day. That's 2.3 grams of sodium. It's roughly the amount in 1 teaspoon of salt. And if you have the opportunity later on, get a teaspoon and fill it with a teaspoon of salt. Fill it up with salt and see how much that is. And imagine sprinkling that on your food throughout the day. You'd actually be surprised. It's more than enough to flavor your food. So the sodium that you're adding through salt, it's probably not contributing that extensively. It's the sodium that's hidden in processed foods, in fast food, restaurants, the sodium is not necessarily in the salt, it's in other food additives as part of the molecular compounds of other things that contribute to the sodium being high. For example, sometimes in like Chinese food, there's monosodium glutamate, MSG. Sodium is part of that molecule. That's not salt, it's monosodium glutamate. It's an amino acid combined with sodium. And that's a source of sodium in your diet. And to make things shelf stable or to preserve things, there's all kinds of food additives that have sodium in their compound. So that's where we get most of our sodium throughout the day. It's not necessarily through seasoning. So we're actually going to look at a couple of examples of high sodium menus. Restaurants that I like Chick-fil-A, I like Chipotle. I've frequented both, probably more times than I care to admit. But we want to look at restaurants that maybe have a health halo around them that may not actually be quite as good for us as we thought we were doing. We thought, oh, we're doing pretty good if we're doing fast food from Chipotle. They use, peppers and tomatoes and legumes. And Chick-fil-A, it's a lean protein chicken. Well, let's take a look actually and go into their menu. And I want to ask somebody to share, let's say Chick-fil-A is an example. We're going to go through their menu as soon as I can share my screen. And I'm going to have you build what you would normally get here. And we'll do the same thing for Chipotle. And we're going to see how much sodium is in that particular product. So let's go to, anyone want to volunteer for this? Can I get a volunteer for telling me what you typically get at Chick-fil-A?
I don't think we have Chick-fil-A here in Canada.
Probably not. I don't think you're going to have that. It's very popular here. So for our members who live here in Arkansas, or even just shout out a menu item. Otherwise, I'm going to pick random. All right, I'm going to go to the salad because we think we're doing well with let's say we do a Cobb salad. A lot of people think you're doing pretty well to choose a salad or even a market salad. Let's look at the total sodium content of that meal. This is milligrams of sodium for even probably what would be considered the healthiest option in the market salad. There's well over 1,000 milligrams of sodium. That's a gram of sodium. If you think back to the D.A.S.H recommendations, the D.A.S.H recommendations of 2,300 milligrams per day, that's over about half of your daily needs right there in one meal, and something that you thought was being pretty good. The Cobb salad is an even bigger issue. 2.2 grams of sodium in that one meal. So it's pretty extreme. The other entrees are actually better options, even like the spicy deluxe sandwich, for example. There's only 550 milligrams of sodium. That's still pretty high, but that's just a clue to check in at the restaurants that you frequent and go online and look at their menus and see what the sodium content is of the things that you're eating. And in Canada, whatever's popular there, I know in the US, chain restaurants are required to post their nutrition information online or in menu format at their locations. So it should be available to you wherever you frequent, as long as it's not like a mom and pop store or restaurant. If it's a chain, they're going to have this information posted. So again,
yes, they do.
Yes. So you can find out very easily what's in the things that you're eating. Okay, Danielle says chicken wrap and unsweet tea. All right, let's look at the chicken wrap here. I'm guessing that would be under entrees. Chick-fil-A Cool Wrap, is that it? Click on it.
Yes.
Okay. We'll go back. Unsweet tea is not going to have a heck of a lot. In fact, it probably has a little bit of magnesium. That's pretty good. So, all right. So going back down. All right. So the cool wrap here. What's it got? I'm having all kinds of trouble navigating the website here. Oh my goodness. Okay, I think we're close here. Okay. The 1, 2, 3, 4. Sodium. Okay. Sodium is the column we're looking for. We're going down to the wrap. 900 milligrams. I think that's, yeah. So 900 milligrams, that's almost a full gram of sodium in that wrap. If you're eating the whole thing, I mean, that's a pretty high load. When you think of at any given time, if you're having a gram of sodium, that could spike your blood pressure for several hours afterwards if you tend to be sensitive to sodium, especially. That would be a time if you wanted to do a home experiment, eat something like that and measure at intervals, what your blood pressure is doing before, during, and after, and you can really get an idea of how your blood pressure responds to a meal that has high sodium like that. So pretty high amounts of sodium there. I want to go to another restaurant and do some of the same things here. So go back to the presentation. And now we're looking at Chipotle. Does anyone have, and you can unmute for this one because we're actually going to build your burrito or burrito bowl. Anyone want to volunteer what they would get at Chipotle?
I will.
All right, Elizabeth, let me get to the nutrition part of this. All right, what do you normally get?
I usually get a bowl with the lettuce and black beans. And
Your internet's being a
do you want me to
little...
slow down or keep going?
I'm still waiting on the website to load, so give me just
okay.
a second here. It might be something we'll have to come back to.
That's okay.
Okay, there it's going. Okay. All right, select a meal to begin. So you do a burrito or a bowl?
A bowl.
Okay. Well, I clicked on burrito. Whoops. Okay. Start over. Wow, it's really being lethargic here. So we're going to do a bowl. Oh my gosh. All right, we're just going to cancel this and move on. Okay. You get the idea, and I guarantee it would come out to probably somewhere between 700 to 1,500 milligrams of sodium, depending on what you added to it. And that's an example of how even a restaurant where you think is being helpful to you, the fact that you didn't prepare it at home can really, you're giving up that control of what's going through your body. You're allowing, big food companies to decide what they want to put in their meal, their food, to kind of make it taste good, make you come back. It plays on psychology and flavor to make sure that you return as frequently as you can. So they kind of hack our flavor profile or tendencies to play off of the fat, salt, and sugar, things that we tend to prefer, and in order to make a profit. And there's no harm in that, but just you need to be aware of that as a consumer, that the more often you eat out, probably the less overall health quality you're going to have long term. Let me go back to sharing the presentation. All right, so when you're looking at foods that you purchase from the grocery store, there are some terms you need to be familiar with. One is reduced sodium or low sodium, and the other term is no sodium added. Are you able to see on your screen the fine print here, or is it too small to read?
It's too small.
Okay. Well, I'll kind of have to zoom in on my screen. If I were able to share the full screen, you might be able to see it. So let me get on here. The first option is Bush's black beans that are seasoned. And the sodium content, I believe, is around, I want to be specific on this, so give me 2 seconds here. Apologies for the delay. I think my computer is struggling under the weight of managing the presentation and all the things that I have going on here. So that first selection, the seasoned recipe, there are 3 servings per can, and each serving has 440 milligrams of sodium. That's a pretty high amount for just a third of a cup of, or half a cup of black beans. To have almost half a gram of sodium in half a cup of beans is pretty extreme. If you go to the reduced sodium option, it cuts that in half. There's 210 milligrams of sodium per serving. Now, if you wanted to do even better, you could go to the no salt added option, which is the last one there. There is only 10 milligrams of sodium in that serving of black beans. So you go from 440 in the regular seasoned canned option all the way down to almost 0 sodium in the no salt added version. So when you are shopping, you want to check the food labels, check the things that you're buying that are canned, that are shelf stable, that are processed in any way, and just check the sodium content. You might be surprised of how much sodium is in there. And if it's high, look for a low or no sodium option. And that would be my recommendation for shopping. So specifically, what does the D.A.S.H diet, what does it look like in terms of servings per day? For a 2,000 calorie diet, you can see it's very heavily plant-based, 6 to 8 servings of whole grains. When I'm recommending a low carb diet to someone, I'll recommend probably 1 to 2 servings of grain per day when I'm talking about managing blood sugar or type 2 diabetes. So you can see this plan is not a low carb plan. So if you enjoy carbohydrates, go for the D.A.S.H diet pattern. It would be very appealing to you, most likely. Vegetables, 4 to 5 servings per day. It's difficult for me sometimes to get that much, but I try to get them in with a big salad as often as I can. You can really fit a lot of servings of your vegetables in a big salad. I'll often cook down greens with breakfast if I have time to make some eggs in the morning. Do an omelet with peppers and spinach and kale, a little bit of feta cheese thrown in there. A good way to get vegetables in is to cook down greens. Fruits, I don't have issues getting at least 4 servings per day. I love berries. I love blueberries and apples and a banana every once in a while. And you're definitely not restricted on your fruit on the DASH diet. You're going to get a lot of your potassium from fruit. So it's a big part of the DASH plan. Fat-free or low-fat dairy products. This is not a dairy-free eating pattern. If you're sensitive to dairy, you might want to do a dairy alternative, but you get a lot of the benefits from the calcium that are in dairy products. Now, a lot of dairy-free options will still have that calcium fortified in the food, so you're still getting a good calcium intake with dairy-free options here. So 2 to 3 servings per day of the dairy or dairy-free. Lean meats, poultry, eggs, and fish. Oh, good question. What is a serving? Whole grains, about half a cup cooked. So if you had rice, a third to half a cup cooked is 1 serving. 1 slice of bread is 1 serving. 1 corn tortilla is 1 serving. So if you had a sandwich, that would be 2 servings of grain. Maybe you had some oatmeal in the morning. You probably had another couple servings there. So you're already at 4. Maybe with dinner, you have a roll, a whole grain, whole wheat, or something like that nature. Or maybe you have some quinoa as a side or as a base under your dish. There's another couple servings. So you could easily get, a couple servings of grain for each meal. Vegetables, 1 cup raw is a serving, or half a cup cooked is a serving. Fruits, it's going to vary. Half of a medium banana is 1 serving. So if you had a whole banana, it would be 2 servings of fruit. Medium apple is 1 serving. A medium orange is 1 serving. Blueberries, 3/4 of a cup of blueberries is 1 serving. So they go a long way. That's just a general guideline for the vegetables and fruits there. Dairy, 1 cup of milk is considered 1 serving. So that's 8 ounces. A piece of cheese the size of a dice or die is considered 1 serving. So about 1 ounce of cheese is 1 serving. And for the poultry, eggs, fish, and meat, 1 ounce is considered 1 serving. And the recommendation on the DASH diet is to keep a low meat intake overall, limiting your intake to 6 servings or less per day. And that's lower than I frequently recommend for other reasons. But, the DASH diet has been consistently rated number 1 or number 2 in terms of health outcomes for several years in a row now. So you can have a perfectly healthy diet with little meat intake whatsoever. Nuts and seeds and legumes, 4 to 5 servings per week. So this is not a daily recommendation, it's just a weekly recommendation. You're going to get a lot of magnesium from this section, a lot of iron from this section as well. And a serving is going to vary based on what nut or seed it is. A small handful of almonds is about 1 serving. Fats and oils, 2 to 3 servings per day. A teaspoon of butter, for example, is a serving of fat or oil. The same for olive oil, about a teaspoon is considered 1 serving. If you're thinking about fat-rich foods like avocado, 1/8 of an avocado is considered a serving of fat. Olives, I believe 8 to 9 olives are considered 1 serving of fat. So that's some ideas for there. That's a little bit lower than I would recommend when I'm doing like a cardiometabolic food plan or something similar. I'll actually recommend 3 to 5 servings of fat per day, but we focus on unsaturated fats. More of the avocado-based, olive oil-based, plant-based fats that are liquid at room temperature versus the saturated fats that come from animals and things of that nature. Sweets and added sugars, 5 servings or less per week. Again, no food category is eliminated in this food plan. You can still have your desserts, just you want to pay attention to serving size and be reasonable with your intake. And that just goes back to being mindful about what you're choosing and trying to limit it to a reasonable serving size when you do have those things, and no more than 5 per week. And that is the D.A.S.H eating plan in a nutshell. So what are your thoughts? Does anyone have any questions about the D.A.S.H diet, or um, you know, any questions in particular regarding sodium and blood pressure? If you think of something later, you know how to reach me. You can portal message me if you're a member here at SOLT. And if you're just viewing this outside of the presentation, if anything comes to mind, if you want to know more about the D.A.S.H eating pattern, if it would be right for you, we can take a look at your labs. We can see, well, how are you managing carbohydrates? Let's say it comes back that your fasting blood glucose is normal. Your insulin levels are normal. The D.A.S.H eating pattern would work well for you. That's just an example of one type of patient who would benefit from eating this way. So that is it. I'm going to open it up for questions for just a couple more seconds. And if you have any comments, feel free to unmute and ask me. If not, I'm going to be ending it a little bit early tonight. And for those of you that came in late to the presentation, we will be releasing this as a link to go and visit and watch again. So you can have access to the presentation and everything I've talked to you about tonight as well. Okay, I don't think we're going to have any more questions, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'm going to stop recording.